All right, so let's go. 3, 2, and 1. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Persuasion by the Pint. I'm Jonathan Taylor, along with
Sean McCool.
Sean McCool, who is back off of his 14,
Starvation
15, 16-day starvation thing.
Yeah, 12 days. Yeah. So I
Uh,
definitely have a beverage today. So
Good. We're back in the swing of things.
yes.
But we've got a guest joining us here. He's going to be joining us here shortly. Should be an interesting conversation. We're going to be talking about the psychology, sports psychology, a little bit of sports psychology, but what goes into the psychology behind athletes or poker players of all things. So it should be a lot of fun.
The mental game of poker,
mm-hmm.
mental game of trading are a couple of his books. I'll just pop those up real quick.
Absolutely.
And I saw in his bio, it's got some esports stuff going on now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which, last week I saw that, and I've heard this stat before, but it's growing. I want to definitely talk to our guest about it when he comes on. But there's been 2 huge buyouts in the video game world over the last couple of weeks.
Yep.
And that industry is 10 times the size of the movie industry, which is just hard to wrap your head around.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's 10 times the size of Hollywood and the movie industry.
It's huge now. Yeah. I think it's, especially for the younger generation. I mean, it's huge. It's big.
Yeah. It's a legit career now, to be a professional gamer. It's probably just like the pros. I mean, only some small percentage you're going to get there, but still.
Tournaments, all sorts of things like that around the country just going on. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's amazing. So,
I mean, I like Madden, but not that much.
Yeah, no, I've just never been a gamer. I mean, I've had some of the stuff growing up, but I was never like a legit serious gamer. And I know a lot of guys our age are still
doing it. Yeah,
20 hours a week, 40 hours a week, just crazy amount of stuff. So
I had to stop in my 20s because I was like, I was never like a major, except for Madden, like the Madden thing, and I had to give that up because I was like, you start to take an assessment of how much time you spend like online playing other people, and the amount of emotional energy that goes into that when you, and we'll probably be talking about that today with our guests, the amount of frustration and emotion and how that affects the rest of your time, because you get so caught up in it with other people, and then, man, it can really affect you mentally. So not to mention how much time I was like taking a little audit of the time that I spent doing that. I'm like, holy cow.
Yeah.
That's not a good use of time. So
exactly.
So
actually our guest. Yeah.
Yeah. I think he's in the green room now. He's so I want to give him a little introduction before we bring him on. I think he does. I think he might have a beverage, but anyway, our guest today is Jared Tendler. He's an international recognized mental game coach. And as I mentioned, we're going to be discussing the topic of psychology and success. He's gotten, he's authored 2 best-selling books, The Mental Game of Poker and The Mental Game of Poker 2. Jared's roster of clients spans 45 countries and includes independent and institutional traders, world champion poker players, entrepreneurs, esport athletes, as we were just talking about, and also several PGA players. His interest in the mental game was born out of his own personal experience. Jared says, while playing golf at collegiate golf at Skidmore College, where he was a 3-time All-American. He won 9 tournaments. But his biggest problem was that he choked on major national events.
Oops.
So, you're kind of driven to find those answers. So,
yes,
sure. So he got into this whole psychology, sports psychology, and what goes into it. So he's helping athletes, he's helping gamers out there, and we're happy to have him on the show to talk about this. To me, it's a fascinating subject, Sean, because I was telling him that, one of the things I was watching, I think it was before the collegiate championship, or Georgia, Alabama, but he's just talking about how coaches like Nick Saban are huge. And I mean, so many coaches today are big believers in bringing in guys like Jared in the field of sports psychology to really help, their players get over the hump. It's a big part of it. So
why don't you whip up the crowd, and I will add Jared to the stream here.
Yeah. Here we go.
Ready.
Whip up the crowd. So welcome to the show, Jared.
Hey, what's up, fellas?
Absolutely.
There we go.
See, Jared was on my other podcast last week. He didn't have the audience like we do on this week.
This feels special. This feels like it's like ramping up the pressure. I got to bring my A game here.
Absolutely. Yeah. Hope you can keep your mental game in check.
That's right.
Yeah. If only I knew somebody had any idea what the heck to do with that stuff.
Exactly.
So before we get in the middle game, we got to find out what your beverage game is. Do you have a beverage with us today?
I do. I got some kind of the leftovers from the summer.
Okay. That's okay.
Yeah,
it's been sitting in a while.
I'm not a connoisseur like my friends are, so it's kind of whatever gets left off. But this is like a morning glass sour ale.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Okay.
It's kind of fruity. I tend to like a little sweetness to my my drinks. I'm not a big hoppy guy, so.
Okay. Yeah. Neither are we.
Yeah, I'm not big on sours though, so that may be really sour by now. Who knows? So
I'll tell you right now.
So who's the brand and what's the?
It's actually pretty good. Who is it? It's from Point Pleasant, New Jersey.
Okay.
Last Wave Brewing.
Okay. So. Very good.
Yeah.
All right. So what kind of sour did you say? Just a sour ale. Does it have a flavor attached to it?
It says it's brewed with vanilla, lactose. That's kind of weird. Passion fruit and guava.
Okay.
We'll see.
Sounds interesting.
It's not bad.
It's not bad. It's interesting combo there.
Yeah. I've heard weirder. We've had a few beers with lactose, so that's not totally weird, but that's
it's not like I taste
the sours. Yeah. Yeah, I don't think you can taste the lactose. It's just one of those weird brewing ingredients that they throw in. So
yeah.
Jonathan, what do you
milk? You just say milk, right?
Yeah, just say milk.
There you go.
Milk stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
So Jonathan, what do you have up there?
All right, I've got a Rogue. Let's see. This one is a Rogue Shakespeare Stout.
Okay.
All right. It is a. It says the. I'm trying to
drink or not to drink. That is.
Today I was going to say because it's got a little saying underneath. I was going to say to drink or not to drink. Is that what it says? It says here's to writing your own story.
Well, there you go.
Wow,
there you go.
That's poetic.
So it says the Rogue Ales. Let's see. This is the Shakespeare Stout. It was founded in Ashland, a Southern Oregon college town, home to the world-renowned Oregon Shakespeare Festival. And a little trivia that I'll throw in there. It was inspired by this little festival, the Shakespeare Festival, and they introduced this English-style oatmeal stout as one of their 3 original beers when it was first opened in 1988. So interesting. Not heavy on the ABVs, only about 5%, Sean. So
that's pretty light for a stout.
Yeah. I was expecting a little higher. It's 5.7, but it's 60 IBUs on top of that. So that's crazy.
Wow. That is sure that's a stout.
Yeah.
It seems mislabeled. Yeah. It's weird.
That's a stout color, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I've got an Austin East Ciders. I've got an original dry cider coming at you today.
Oh, nice.
And this is pretty basic. Hard apple cider, cane sugar, brown sugar. Pretty good. And I'm drinking in my fancy new glass that I got myself for Christmas. I don't think you can see it, but hey, you can. You see the bubbles coming out?
I see the pineapple.
The bubbles, yeah.
The bubbles are it's got the etching in the bottom that's supposed to keep the bubbles coming so you don't lose the head. So just a basic dry cider. I've got a flavored one for the next episode, but for this one we're just going straight dry cider. So
by the way, I love your banner in the background.
You like that?
It's very apropos for today's topic.
Exactly. Yes.
Ted Lasso obviously would approve.
Yes. It's a little big. It's a little, a little fancy. I was gonna just do the little construction paper cutout. I was like, no, I want to go big. I want the banner. So,
There you go.
anyway, only like
Jared, are
$6.
you a big Ted Lasso fan?
Yeah, I mean it's a good show. I mean he's Jason Sudeikis does an amazing job. I mean it's gotta love his sayings. Obviously, there's a lot of psychology in the show too, right? I mean, kind of breaking apart his psyche a little bit too, which has been cool. So yeah, it's fun. I mean, it's fun. It's funny. I'm a fan of British accents. My 7-year-old and I have been kind of whipping out ours the last few days. So
sure,
yeah. Are you guys fans?
It's good. Oh yeah, well, obviously I am. So
yeah.
That'd be pretty cool to jump off of today. I mean, it's a nice cultural thing going on right now for you to jump off blog posts or talks or anything else with. So it's kind of cool to have that.
Yeah, for sure.
Well,
especially because they actually bring in a sports psychologist too. So
yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Yeah.
All right. Cheers.
Good to see you guys. Yep. Happy Friday.
Yes.
It's good. Tastes like the either the wine or the champagne I used to get before I was 21 on New Year's Eve. The parents would give you the sparkling, sparkling cider,
sparkling BS.
Yeah, that's what this tastes like.
Yeah.
All right, Jared. So we have a rating. It's our tradition: 1 to 5 pints, 5 being the best. You can go, decimal. So it doesn't have to be a whole number. You can go like 3, 5, something like that.
So you do pi if you want, like as many digits as you know.
Sure.
Where this one ranks?
Yep. 1 to 5 pints.
I actually think pi is actually pretty close. So we'll just call it right there.
Okay.
All right. Yeah. So that's 3.14 something.
3.14. Yeah.
And it's going to go on forever, which is probably how the sour taste is going to feel in my mouth for the next 4 hours.
Yeah, exactly. All right, Jonathan, how's that low alcohol stout with the high bitterness?
Man, it's these nitros. I haven't had a nitro in a while, so you know how they taste with the I guess the air bubbles or whatever.
Yeah.
The micro bubbles. Kind of a little flat tasting on my end, but so I might have to get under the pie. I might have to go 3.04. I'll just go. I'll go a solid 3. It's okay, but it's pretty flat tasting to me. So I'm not overly impressed.
Yeah. So mine's a cider, so different than what we usually have on the show, but this is my first alcohol since the fast, so I decided to go in with cider, see if that's gentler. But
how long were you fasting?
12 days.
Okay. Like no food fast, like
water only.
Oh wow, that's legit.
That's amazing. I can't.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna give this it's good. I mean, it's a light. It's a little sweet, but you could drink a couple of these. Crisp air outside, winter, probably be good heated up actually. So I'm gonna give this I'm gonna give it a 3.95, like just under 4, because it's just a good flavor, good taste.
Yeah. Okay.
So 3.95.
3.95. It is.
Right.
You had the highest score to 3.95. That's
it's a weak.
It is. Well, Jared, thanks for coming on, spending some time with us. We I mentioned to Sean, you were on one of my other podcasts this past week, my industry podcast. I thought it was we had a great conversation, great interview. Yeah. I find this topic extremely fascinating, but before we kind of dig in, if you would kind of share a little bit about your background. You've played collegiate golf. Obviously, some happenings there that kind of were instrumental in you getting involved in this. So maybe if you could share a little bit about your story and how you got in, obviously how you got into the world of poker. I mean, that's pretty interesting.
You kind of gave some of the good highlights there. Basically the choking started in 97 when I tried to qualify for the US Open.
Sure.
And, that qualification has two stages to it. So there's local qualifying, which is kind of all the schlubs. And then sectional qualifying includes, a pretty good amount of PGA Tour players, right? Because only about half the field in the US Open automatically qualifies. Everybody else has to go through sectionals. So, here I'm at locals, first time doing it, hit 16 greens, 13 fairways, some of the best golf of my life, and basically kind of choke over some short putts, which was my weakness. But, these are putts that under normal circumstances I'm making. So I missed getting through by a shot. And, so, okay, fine. It happens once. It's a one-off. Happens again, qualifying for the USAM. So then I kind of start diving into Bob Rotella's works in Golf's Not a Game of Perfect and other sports psychology. And my game at that point, kind of continues to progress. But again, each time I'm playing in those big kind of national USGA events, got kind of two hands around my neck. So I kind of make a decision, right, that I'm not going to try to make it as a pro at that point, that I got to have to solve this issue. And just the answers didn't really seem to be out there. And so I kind of reasoned that, all right, well, sports psychology to me felt too kind of behavioral, like you're anxious, so we're going to teach you to, to relax and calm down. You're not confident, so we're going to boost your confidence. You're angry, we're going to get you to, be more zen. And it just felt too kind of easy. And it again, for me, it broke under high pressure. So I reasoned that, the skills of a therapist would help to kind of get a little bit deeper. And if I could kind of solve my own issues, then I'd be able to have a career, as a coach, or I'd be able to play professional golf. And so I went to Northeastern, got a master's degree in counseling psychology, spent 2 years getting trained and licensed as a therapist. And then once I got my license 2 years later, I quit my job, moved to Arizona, and started working with golfers because obviously I knew golf well. And, kind of built up a decent roster, some PGA Tour players, LPGA gal that I worked with, won fairly soon after we started working together. So that was huge. Had some pretty good junior players. One who I started working with who, when he was 10 years old, is now on the Korn Ferry Tour, just kind of a notch below the PGA Tour, which is super cool. But I found it difficult to kind of really break through in the golf industry, partially because golfers are kind of full of themselves. They're a bit overconfident. They say golf's a mental game, but they're not really kind of willing to put their money where their mouth is. They too quickly want to look for easy answers, at least at that point. I think it's changed a bit more now since kind of Tiger has changed the game firmly forever. But ironically,
so wait a minute, you're saying that golfers, they look for easy answers, like little gimmicks and things like that are advertised on Facebook to help your game, to help shave like 4 or 5 strokes off your game?
I mean, it wasn't Facebook back then, but it was infomercials, and it was golf, just buying clubs. I mean, they want to work on their swing. I mean, it's hard to understand why you suck or why you suck in certain situations. And it's hard to admit that. And, to admit that you've got like a mental problem, right? Like, for a lot of people is hard to do until you actually realize that like everybody has a psychological weakness. It's not possible to be perfect. If you're perfect, you're dead, right? That's how you know that you're in heaven, at least my conception of it. So, we all have weaknesses, but, for a lot of people, that's hard to admit to. And ironically, I met, a former professional golfer who became a professional poker player about 3 years after I started coaching. And he was kind of early in the online poker game, making $20,000 to $30,000 a month. But he had massive tilt issues, right? So he, understood kind of the luck factor in golf, right? You hit a good shot, gets a bad bounce. In poker, the luck factor is X-fold more. It's the equivalent of hitting perfect drive after perfect drive after perfect drive down the middle of the fairway, and it just keeps hitting a sprinkler head and going out of bounds. And it would just drive you insane if that was going to continue to happen. And for in poker, like that can happen for months, even years, honestly, years. Like they've done calculations. It can go on for years if you're, not either if you're playing live or not playing that much. So for him playing high volume, he's playing 14 tables at one time online, his head is going to explode. And he would literally rip the desktop computer out of the wall, smash it. It was punching his monitor, destroying his mouse. And so, he didn't care about the cost of the equipment. He cared that he was losing time playing. So,
14 tables at one time. He's doing this.
Like 1,000 hands an hour he's playing.
That's unbelievable.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's
remarkable.
Can't even imagine. So you mentioned, and I saw this as I was doing some research, Jared, you mentioned the word tilt. I think that'll probably come up again. Can you just define, because you also talk about this in trading, you talk about this with poker, like, can you just define tilt? Because I know it's going to come up a few times.
Yeah. So tilt should be a common phrase, right? Everybody in the world should know about it because it's a lot more fun way of saying you've got an anger problem. Right? Okay. So anger management should be tilt management. Basically poker players say, oh man, I tilted my face off and I'm out, right? Out of a tournament or busted out of the cash game. And so, basically what it means is you get really angry and you make a bunch of bad mistakes, and, there's some derivations of it, right? Like a raging tilt monkey, right? So now all of a sudden you're not just tilting, but you're making a pretty big spectacle of yourself too.
Okay.
So yeah, tilt is a way more fun way of basically just saying you got angry and did a bunch of dumb things.
So you threw your clubs, if it's golf,
threw your clubs. Tilt rage, right? On the road. I mean, I guess road rage still is probably that's a good phrase. We can keep that one.
Yeah.
But yeah.
What about in business? Because I know you cross over to business a little bit too, and I want to make sure we kind of tie that in throughout the show. But what does that look? What does tilting look like for maybe an entrepreneur or something?
Yeah, I mean, so we take like a sales guy who lost a big sale at the last minute, right? And so it's unlikely they're going to do something too stupid to another client, but they might do something pretty stupid to that lost client, and then they're gone forever. Or they might just look really bad to other colleagues. I mean, customer service operations. I mean, being able to control your emotions in general is a big thing. I mean, I think in negotiations, right? I mean, anger can certainly get the better of you. And I think if you're a really good negotiator, much like if you're a really good poker player, you find ways to kind of poke and prod and, create some of that emotional volatility. So people do make mistakes. I mean, that's what like highly skilled, poker players and negotiators tend to do. So yeah, I mean, the anger kind of shows up in lots of places. Sometimes it can be, kind of self-directed, right? You make a mistake. You send an email with a bunch of typos in it, and, you're a perfectionist, or, you send an email after maybe a couple too many of these, and, wake up the next morning and, so there's lots of reasons why you can get pissed off, right? I think, in poker, we talk about running bad tilt, right? So that's the anger you get for going through that bad streak of bad luck. Injustice tilt, right? When you think something is unfairly happening to you, you'll get angry. Obviously, mistakes I talked about. Entitlement tilt. So those who know Phil Hellmuth know some of his antics. He basically gets really angry because when players kind of play back at him in a way that he doesn't think is appropriate, they shouldn't be re-raising him there. They should know how good he is. And of course you're supposed to fold that hand. Like what the hell is wrong with you? So there's a sense of entitlement, right? That you believe that you're past skills and your history and whatever it is that you think you're walking in with means that you deserve respect and you deserve not to be pushed around. You deserve whatever you think the rules ought to be.
Yeah, a little self-righteous.
Very self-righteous. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then there's everybody's favorite revenge tilt. So
I love that there's all these names for tilt. That's
yeah. So I mean, in the first poker book, I came up with 7. There's the 7 types of tilts.
Okay.
And then the last one's called desperation tilt, which is where you get so angry. Now you're just like shoving any 2 cards in trading. This happens a lot, right? You lose a bunch of money. I mean, today's a kind of a prime example of that for a fair number of people. Yeah. You lose a bunch of money, and so you're now kind of desperately trying to make up for it. And what do? You dig yourself a deeper hole. It's kind of trying to like run in quicksand. So
it's like traders. They lose. They make a bad trade. You talk about that with the same industry. They make a bad trade, they lose money, and now they're trying to catch up from what from what they lost. So it gets
there are ways of catching up, right? I mean, if you are a good poker player, you're a good trader. I mean, if you're good in business, you got like some kind of way of making money reliably. You need to continue to do that, right? I mean, obviously you can get better at it, right? You can always enhance your skills and improve the way you're operating, but the odds that you're going to somehow come up with a better way of doing that in the midst of a kind of moments of rage is pretty low. So whatever you think is your good idea at that point is not. Whatever you think you sense and feel in that moment is not actually right. And the problem is, right, when anger really makes you think that all of your actions are justified, and we can think of many a bar fight that would kind of fit in that category.
Yeah, I mean, isn't it true that part of your brain, your decision-making part of your brain kind of shuts down when you're in that state of either fear or rage, tilt, whatever.
Any emotion. Actually, overconfidence can create it. You can have a euphoric, elation, and that can do the exact same thing. But you're 100% right. And then that's actually something that everybody needs to know. I mean, it should now be sort of standard and taught in, 7th and 8th grade, because that's kind of when it begins to really show up. So yeah, it's proportional. I think, people probably know it as the fight or flight mechanism. The problem to me with that term is that it feels kind of like a light switch. Like you're either going to kind of turn it on or turn it off. Right. And it's much more like a dimmer switch. Or I guess that's not a switch, but a dimmer. And if you sort of lose access to that logical thinking in proportion to the amount of emotion that you have, once it sort of reaches that point. So what I do with a lot of my clients, and it also happens when the emotions are too low, right? Because if you're professional, right, and you're trying to be at your best, your emotions can't be too low either, right? You need to have enough intensity, enough energy in order to kind of power yourself to be in the zone or to be in that optimal state. So we're kind of always looking to kind of move towards that middle ground. And you need to be able to identify the subtle instances, the subtle details and descriptions that indicate that your mind is becoming compromised. Your emotions are rising too high, or that they're actually too low, and you need to kind of fire yourself up. I think the Atlanta Falcons would have loved to have, kind of understood that in halftime prior to losing the Super Bowl. But
I had to bring that one up, didn't you?
I did. I'm sorry.
Well, speaking of emotions, I was on your blog and I saw this on your site, and I thought this was fascinating. I assume, even though this is trading psychology survey that you did with your list of people, I think obviously probably applies to pretty much. I would think it'd be very similar for poker, for business, for anything else. And you said that 96% believe that psychology plays an important role in trading. 91% see emotions affect their trading decisions, but only 34% have a strategy for managing. And you actually talk a lot in your books about not dismissing emotions. Like a lot of times we want to overcome our emotions, and you kind of disagree with that.
Yeah. So I'll say two things. First, I actually think that if we were to do a survey like this across like kind of business, I think that 96%, 91% number would be way lower.
Think so?
I do. Yeah. I mean, I think certainly in certain industries, it's just not talked about enough. I mean, traders are bombarded. They know and understand psychology matters, and it because it's been kind of drilled into them since the early 90s. I think if you were to,
it's not that people wouldn't have the emotions controlled; they just wouldn't be as aware of it.
Yes, exactly. I don't think they would. I don't think they would. I think a lot of professionals would say, "Oh, emotions," or I'm a cardiologist, I'm a lawyer, salesperson. Maybe sales probably are more aware of it. I mean, I think there will be certain industries, but I think across the board, if I were to guess, I would say that number would probably be close to the 75%. I would say that it matters, and they might even just be like, "Oh, yeah, on the spot, yeah, it matters," right? Of course, they wouldn't think about it day to day, right? Traders, 96%, no, day to day, like this thing matters. Okay. And then what's that number that can actually recognize their emotions in real time? I think that would be probably lower in percentage, right? So there's a kind of a 5-point drop, probably would be lower than that. And then of course, the numbers that have a system is far lower. So yeah, to your second point about the kind of controlling emotion, overcoming emotion, it's really more about realizing that emotions are not the problem, right? I mean, if emotions are the smoke to a fire, right? The fire in this case is these underlying beliefs, biases, illusions, flaws, wishes that we kind of have in the background of our mind. So, an example of that from a poker and trading standpoint would be a belief that they can win and make money every single day. And some even have an expectation that that's the case. And you can imagine how much more emotion gets created when that doesn't happen. And then when it doesn't happen, right, there's anger that gets created. And then, when they're in a trade or, they're up a certain amount of money, they'll become fearful and want to kind of lock that up prematurely, And so you can't control the emotion for the same reason I couldn't, right, when I was playing golf, right? This sort of top-down logical process begins in the part of the brain called the prefrontal cortex. And that part of the brain can be overridden by the emotional system, right? So it's just sort of this weird architecture in the brain about how emotions have the power to shut down the part of it responsible for controlling it. So if you're trying to control your emotions, you can't rely on that part of the brain because it's just going to get steamrolled. So the way around that, right, is to understand the cause of the emotion and actually work over time to correct that. And if you do, it becomes like the argument that you have with a spouse or a significant other or a friend where there's just tension, right? There's clearly a problem. And until that problem has been addressed and resolved, that emotion will remain. Now you can kind of work around it. You can pretend it's not there and you'll get away with it for so long. But ultimately, like when it's resolved, I mean, either things go back to as they were, or your relationship is actually stronger, right? Because there's more, kind of understanding on both sides. So the same thing happens for us, right? We want to actually solve those problems. So the emotion's gone, right? You're performing at your best when you are full of like the right kinds of emotions. The Michael Jordans of the world, the elite athletes, they have a mastery of their emotions. They understand the mixture that is required for them to be at their best. So for Jordan, he actually needed to get angry in order for him to be at his best. And, there's lots of stories of him like making up these slights from other players to generate that emotion. But, for other people, anger becomes too volatile, right? They can't control it. For others, they need to feel fear or pressure. The poker player that I mentioned earlier, he actually had a brain scan done like 4 or 5 years after he and I had been working together. And what they found was that he was able to enter the zone in a very atypical way. And it was really kind of the kind of somewhat proof of like what we had been doing, because the atypical way was that he was able to do it without anxiety. Most people, most professionals need that extra bit of anxiety to get into the zone. But for him, it was coming from more pure motivation, right? His desire to be his best. That's what drove the action. That's what drove his mind to be at, in that kind of zone flow state.
Tom Brady does a lot of that. He's like always, it's like he lives with a chip on his shoulder. I was reading an interview this week. I mean, despite all of his successes, he's won more Super Bowls than any other quarterback in history. But yet, I was just reading a little interview or a article about him this week. He's going in, I think they're playing the 49ers in the playoffs this weekend. And he's like talking about 22 years ago, he used to be, I guess he grew up a big 49ers fan when he was a kid. He used to love Joe Montana.
He's from California,
but,
right?
Yeah, he's from California. So he was a huge 49er fan, but he's like, he's just talking about, I'm not, these guys passed over me 6 times in the draft back 22 years ago, And so, I'm no longer a 49ers fan, and I really, I have a grudge against that. I was like, okay. But I'm sure that, that's not really the case, but he, that's something that obviously motivates him.
I mean, I would bet it is to him. I mean, that's what they need. Like I say, we're talking about Jordan, Tiger to a certain degree. Like Tiger lived and died on being able to have this sort of God complex for a long time, right? Until his front teeth got knocked in. So, athletes at that level need to have a little bit of psychopath in them, right? They need to have that conviction. I'm not saying that everybody at that level does, because you look at like the Roger Federers, Rafa Nadal's, there's plenty of other athletes that don't do that. But the point is that every athlete at that level has figured out the formula, right? Figured out what kind of mixture of emotions, right, is required for them to be at their best.
Sure.
Yeah, I think you see that in business too. You see the entrepreneurs that constantly back themselves into corners.
Yep.
So they get that adrenaline rush to like, work out of it.
Yeah, it's a good, so another actually common trait for entrepreneurs, as well as many people, is procrastination. So for some people, they have difficulty actually solving their procrastination issues because of how productive they are when, things actually need to get done. They want consistency, but they're not willing to kind of take down, what they perceive as to be high level output at those certain times. But
there's a thrill. I mean, I've done it myself plenty of times. Like there's definitely that thrill of like being able to get everything done in, overnight. When you could have done it a little bit.
Staying up all night, getting it done.
Term papers come to mind in school.
There's a reason I can't drink Red Bull anymore.
Yeah. Like, So that's interesting. What are some other, what are some ways that you can do that more on purpose? Like, what are some of the tips you give to people to help them with their mental game and kind of keep it from like that extreme where it's like all of a sudden you're pounding Red Bulls overnight trying to get a project done?
Yeah, I mean, I think the most simple thing that anybody can do, whether we're talking about trying to be at your best, right, to be in the zone, to have that kind of high level output, or to avoid, the fear, the anger, the greed, confidence issues, motivational issues, discipline issues, right, that becomes sort of fairly endemic on the other side, right? So in either direction, you just need to study and take notes about like what's happening when things are off or what's happening when things are optimal or ideal. It's just so easy for people to kind of just roll into one or the other and feel like they're random, and they're not random, right? They exist in very particular patterns, right? We can study ourselves, and so a very simple way of doing that would be to write down, so let's say we're dealing with kind of the emotions that are problematic. So in those situations, bless you, Jonathan, write down the thoughts that are coming to mind, the emotions that are present at that point, maybe the changes in your perception, right? So sometimes those perceptions might be like you start to feel like somebody else is out to get you, right? Or you start to think that that this business opportunity is way better, right? Because again, overconfidence is a big problem. Mm-hmm. You overestimate the probability that this thing is going to pay off, the opportunity is, and you're not really thinking about the downside risk, right? And so what are the situations where it comes up? What are the thoughts that are going through your mind? What are the emotions? What are the changes in your actions, changes in your decision making? Just track that, write all that down. On the flip side, same thing. So when things are going really well, what's the situation, right? We're dealing with the zone and kind of peak energy. We're looking at kind of motivation. How connected do you feel to that? How connected do you feel to the why, right? The why behind your goals is really important to kind of drive that. What is your focus like? Your energy from a physical standpoint. Are you doing meditation? Are you sleep and exercise and diet and those things? So again, the studying is key because we have a limited capacity in our brain to hold information. And if you are relying on your memory, there's no way that you can kind of dig deeper and identify kind of all of the details that are surrounding this. Because when you're trying to replicate something or avoid it, you need to know in advance, right, that something is off, right? So there's something off motivationally. Okay, today's not going to be a day you're going to get in the zone unless you understand how to ratchet it up. Or conversely, you need to know that the anger is beginning to kind of pick up, right? There's some frustration, irritation, and if it accelerates, it's going to, lead to tilt. In order to identify those details, you need to be writing things down. And to me, it's a lot like dumping out the puzzle pieces to a 500 piece puzzle, right? Imagine just only getting to look at, 5 or 7 pieces at once. Your ability to actually finish that puzzle is going to take a lot longer, right, than it needs to. You dump all the pieces out. Now you can look at it and put things together. So the more notes you take down, it's like kind of dumping more puzzle pieces out. And eventually you can kind of fit things together and understand your patterning. And then once you understand your pattern, I'm not saying it's game over, right? There is kind of the G.I. Joe scenario where, knowing is half the battle here, right? The other half of the battle is like, what are you going to do about it? Right. But at least, that first piece, right, what people call self-awareness is just studying yourself. I mean, it's not like this like mystical thing that you either have or you don't. It's a freaking skill. Right. And every single client that I've worked with, and I've worked with well over, maybe a couple thousand at this point. I mean, I've been working for 16 years, so who the heck knows for sure, but it's a lot of people. Every single person has been able to get better at this, and pretty quickly, right, when they actually do the work. So that's the first thing you can do, and it's actually, it doesn't cost you anything. You just need a piece of paper and a pen.
And I mean, part of me is like, well, that seems counterintuitive for, like, I think there's people that are more predisposed to tracking and measuring and things like that, and then there's the other group that I think is less inclined to do that kind of stuff. So sure. I can see where like having a coach or something like that to review your week and help you pull those things out would be very, very valuable, at least to learn this skill, maybe.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think you're letting them off the hook a little bit. It does take just, to do anything, you either have to trust in the person that's telling you to do it, right, or you need proof. And so if you're in the I need proof, just do a test it out for 2 weeks. what I'm suggesting could literally take you 5 minutes a day. So there's not like any big hurdle to doing it, except the desire to actually improve yourself.
So is this like an end of day thing or in the moment? Is it like an end of day or in the moment kind of thing that you're taking these notes?
Ideally it's somewhat in the moment, right? I mean, you want to capture the data when it's fairly raw, but if you're at least doing it at the end of the day or at some point in reflection, then you're going to get something that's better than just your memory, because you're going to go to sleep and you're not going to remember it. And you think, right, in the moment, right, we get so convinced that, oh, like, I am never going to do that again. I'm not going to lose my cool like that. And it doesn't happen for a month. Like, you're just not going to remember in advance of it happening. You're going to realize it in the moment, and then you're going to be like, ah, freaking hell. Like, of course I knew, right? Because you weren't prepared. Like, I mean, the cool thing about poker and trading, and this is why I love those environments, the feedback loop is so freaking tight. So, the guy was telling, playing 1,000 hands an hour. He's playing a full 72 hole PGA tour event every single day. So he goes through all of these ups and downs. So if we want to, study his pattern, just pay attention for a couple of days, maybe 3 or 4, and we're going to be able to map it, right? But with business, you might not have the same situation come up, for 6 months, maybe a year. And so, at that scale, but there's probably going to be like lots of small things that are going to show up that you're not going to even know are in the same category as anger, because it's not going to rise to that level, and you're missing opportunity, to get better at it, right? Because you can practice being aware. So yeah, it does not take a lot of time. It just takes a willingness to actually want to get better. And I say, like a willingness, because I'm certain that there are people listening right now saying, yeah, no, I'm willing to do it. But then, in a few weeks from now, or even a couple of days from now, they're either going to forget about it, or they're just not going to do it because they don't think the value's there. You're not going to learn whether there's value here, at least for a couple of weeks, because you just need to kind of practice doing it. But it's not rocket science. It just takes a little bit of attention.
So can you give us some examples of what that might, like what type of notes somebody might take?
So let's take a situation where you're getting angry because of your own mistakes, right? Okay. So, what are the specific thoughts that are coming to your mind, right? I'm a freaking idiot. Why the heck would I do that? And then you want to write down the situation, right? Now, if you're making mistakes that are quite obvious, right, then you should have some self-reflection that says, well, why did I even make it? Like, what got me to that point in the first place? Because there's probably a high likelihood that there was emotion present before that. So maybe it was complacency, maybe it was a little bit of boredom, distractions. And so then you can start kind of mapping that stuff. Like, what are the situations where you're most likely to be a little bit, maybe kind of too, I guess in some way, like overconfident, right? Like your actions are a bit too fast and reactive. So write down the specific situation where that's occurring. Let's take fear, right? So fear might cause a lot of hesitation and second guessing and doubt. And so the second guessing and doubt might take the form of, a handful of different excuses, right? That you might say to yourself that tell you why it's okay not to make a decision, at a time when you should. So you write down all those excuses, and you can kind of have a running list of all the excuses you make, right? Sometimes those things can get pretty fun, but eventually they'll become fairly repetitive. So the next time you know that you're making that excuse, you can very cleanly distinguish it as fear, right? Not as some intuition, right? Like it's easy sometimes to get caught up in thinking, much like we said with the anger and that self-justification, thinking that thought that you're having is actually correct, right? It's sort of a high level, like, oh, in this particular moment, I know exactly, what I ought to be doing, but I can't. Now, I mean, I can give you some maybe more specific examples in poker and trading. If you want me to go that route, I can. Otherwise, I'll kind of stay broad as I was.
What's more devastating, overconfidence or fear?
I mean, I think overconfidence is the bigger problem. But people are too overconfident to realize it.
Because it doesn't have that. It doesn't seem as negative as like an anger or something like that. from a societal standpoint is a little more negative. Overconfidence seems almost optimistic.
Yeah, and people kind of fail to realize like how much missed opportunity there is. Like it's easier to like when your losses are fixed, right? Oh, okay. Out of fear, I missed this opportunity and it cost me that, right? It's known. But where the overconfidence kind of prevents you from improving yourself or let's say missing a big opportunity because your actions reflected a bit of arrogance and whoever the client was that they were kind of turned off by it. And so you're not going to blame yourself for that. You're going to think it was the client. So you're not going to calculate it as a loss that is sort of attributed to you. And so you just sort of fail to calculate those losses, and they can be quite large. I mean, there's research that shows that people who are overconfident learn less. You can't. How do you calculate, years of learning less than somebody else? I mean, we probably could maybe throw it into some, spreadsheets and look at, different, salary rankings and things like that. But it's hard for somebody at a certain level to realize that that's what's being lost year over year over year.
Well, I have a friend he does a lot of ice climbing, and he says that's overconfidence. It's not the people that do rock climbing and ice climbing. The people that are killed in those incidents are usually the people. They're not the people who are hesitant from fear, because those are the people that are overly careful about everything they do. He said that most of the deaths come from people that they know it so well that they become so overconfident that they think they know everything, and they miss something in that overconfidence, and it ends up being, to their detriment. They do something stupid.
That's a dramatic example of, I mean, this is like actual death, versus sort of a metaphorical death by 1,000 like paper cuts, kind of Japanese, like you're killing yourself. You don't even realize it.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, and like a very simple way of like recognizing overconfidence is like kind of believing that you're just better than you are, believing that your mistakes aren't really there, ignoring your own weaknesses, not even like being aware of your own weaknesses, assuming that what you think is going to happen is going to happen. There's subtle ways that it shows up. And by and large, like if you're a poker player, if you're a trader, that has a direct and immediate financial cost, and it's a lot easier to identify.
Sure.
Business, it's harder, right? Because the time lag between an overconfident decision and when that feedback's going to come, could be months, if not years sometimes.
Yeah, I think you do, maybe in between those examples, I think going back to golf, you see that like when somebody's, I can make that corner, or I can, whatever, right? It's a little bit overconfident that I'm going to hit that shot perfect as opposed to how I normally hit it.
And they might be able to do it 2 out of 10 times. So the 2 out of 10 times that it happens, right, it feeds that overconfidence and makes it, even harder.
The movie Tin Cup comes to mind.
I was just thinking of that movie, Sean. Good, like Kevin Costner, like on that, when he keeps dropping every time it goes into the water. He just
that I probably would call tilt, right? So there's probably a lot of entitlement tilt in that. So entitlement kind of has a confidence kind of vibe to it, but
I can see that too. Yeah,
I've been called Tin Cup by a couple of my friends too. I mean, the movie came out like around the same time. It was like they thought that I was kind of trying to pull a Rene Russo here. But,
Well, Jonathan's a big golfer. I actually probably tilted and gave up permanently at some point. But Jonathan's a pretty big regular player, so he even wrote a book about golf. So
that's right.
Good for you.
Yeah.
So what else?
Keeps me coming back.
So what else do we need to know about the mental game? Both, because I'm sure we have some poker players and some traders. It's trading's becoming more and more popular as a side hustle and that kind of stuff. So, what are some?
Like 500,000 people created E-Trade accounts in April and May of 2020. So, I mean, I'd say a topic that I think is important across the board. So not even just in poker and trading, is the topic of intuition. And I want to maybe kind of call out a different way of thinking about it that can make it a bit more kind of practical, and kind of easier for people to understand, right? So sometimes intuition and instinct are kind of used interchangeably. And to me, that's dead wrong. They're actually the exact opposite of each other. So intuition is your kind of highest level of decision making, right? It's the information that kind of comes to you in an unconscious way. You don't even know why it's right. You just have a strong feeling for why it's right.
Okay.
Instinct is based off of your kind of hardwired, kind of automatic level skills, right? Your fundamentals in a sense. And you could think about that level being like riding a bike, for example, right? So any decision that you're making that's just purely automatic, but automatic in a very basic way, right? It's like the back of your hand. It's just, the poker player I was talking about playing, 14 tables at once. Most of his decision making is that. It's just very, very instinctual, right? He doesn't have the time to be accessing intuition.
Right.
But, right, in obviously a lot of other situations, let's say when we're reading people in a negotiation, we're reading people in a sales meeting, we're reading people in a courtroom, you name it, right? You have more time, right? Provided that you're in a spot mentally where you're focused, you're attending, you've got really good energy, there's not a lot of emotion at play, right? You have the ability to kind of access intuition. When I'm working with clients, I rely on it. I mean, because my job is to kind of like parse through all these details and kind of see something that they don't, right? If I'm just kind of automatically reacting, I'm not going to see the thing that they've hired me to help them see. So, intuition is your highest level of decision-making and comes in an unconscious way. Instinct is your lowest level of decision-making, your lowest level of skill, at least that's been hardwired, right? And will arrive also in an unconscious automatic way. So, but they come from very different places. And then we have thinking, right? Thinking becomes our tool where we can sort of escape that automatic level of decision-making and be able to make sense of intuition in a way that's far more pragmatic. For most people, they should not just kind of blindly go with their intuition, right? There are people who have become very, very skilled at doing it. But for most people, they've got to actually have a chance to kind of step back and say, all right, here's what a well thought out decision looks like, but here's this information that has kind of come to me spontaneously. How well does it fit? How accurate do I believe it to be? Right. And then they can kind of make their highest level decision. And for athletes, right, intuition is basically kind of, again, it's often called instinct, right? But you look at the descriptions of the zone, right? And time feels like it slows down and they can sense a player's movement and, adapt their body in a way to avoid getting tackled in football, or, Brady can kind of throw in a slightly different arm angle. Patrick Mahomes is a freaking genius at this, right? Like just picking the right arm angle for the type of pass he's going to make. That is not instinctual, right? It's intuition is leveraging instinct to find the nuance in the moment to be able to make that play. He's a very instinctual player at his base, but he's relying on intuition to be at the highest level that he can possibly be.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because instinct is going to be, especially in sports anyway, it's going to be more muscle memory type stuff and reaction. So yeah, I like that differentiation. And I never really thought of those being almost on opposite ends, instinct versus intuition. That's interesting. I know you have I think I saw an ebook on your site about intuition too. So
yeah, exactly. And so, yeah, a lot of my kind of theory on it is there. A lot of what we talked about there is, and ironically, one of the subheadings originally was going to be called instinct versus intuition. And we changed it because of what I said there at the end, where, intuition relies on instinct. So they're not like opposing forces, but they're sort of separate ends of a spectrum, right? And so intuition is the thing that relies on instinct to be able to have, to be able to exist, really.
Right, because the instinct gives you some freedom from having to conscious, competent type action.
Exactly. Yeah, you
So
can't
freeze up.
You need to have like one of the biggest mistakes I see in professionals, right, is there's too big of a gap between them at their best and them at their worst. And when that gap is too wide, you have exactly what you say, which is a lot of conscious, competent material, right? They have to think about too much stuff. Mm-hmm. And that actually limits their ability to access intuition. When you've got kind of a narrower range, as I say, between, your worst and your best, it's easier, right? There's sort of less friction. There's less stuff in your mind. Your mind is more clear and freed up to be able to kind of, like a sponge, just like absorb the data in real time about what's going on. And as long as that absorption is happening without a lot of bias, right? This is very, very important for poker players and traders, right? When you're reading the situation, you don't want your own inherent biases to be affecting your vision of what you're absorbing, right? One of the most common cognitive biases is called the confirmation bias, right? Confirmation bias means that you are seeking information to confirm what you already know. Right. So you're filtering this information flow in a way that's going into a bucket that you've already defined, not what the information is actually saying. And so, yeah, if you're doing that, right, then obviously the intuition that you're going to feel is going to be intuition based on a data set that is incomplete.
And that's especially important, I think, these days, because most of the algorithms, at least information algorithms, they're geared towards your confirmation bias. Like they're actually designed.
They're designed with confirmation bias.
Yes, exactly. So, I mean, trading's a little different because it's a different type of data but I can see how that confirmation bias could definitely get in the way. So, having instinctual patterns, some go-to skills that you've developed into instincts, I think is pretty cool. Well, Jonathan, we're getting close on time. Do you have some other questions on your end?
Oh, it's been great. Just like before. Thanks for spending some time with us today, Jared.
Yeah, happy to, guys.
Maybe you can let our listeners know where they can find out more about you and find out about some of the books that you've authored, the Mental Game of Poker 1 and 2, and then the one on trading. And
yeah, Mental Game of Trading. Yeah, so you're there. I mean, that's kind of primary spot. My website, jaredtendler.com. If you go on that resource tab, you'll see where the intuition ebook is there. There's downloadable worksheets there as well. I used to host a podcast, kind of got bored by it. I'm happy to see you guys kind of keep cranking it. For me, it got repetitive. I was kind of having the same conversations too often. So, but there's old podcasts. There's some great episodes there. You can check those out. And then, the books are kind of widely available. Basically, wherever you buy your books, whether it be on Audible, audiobook, ebook, or softcover, you can pick it up.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for coming on, man. I love this. It's been a lot of fun to talk about, and look forward to following up with you. We'll send out a link once we get this published, and hopefully we can have you back on sometime soon.
Yeah, sounds good. Good to share a brew with you guys on a Friday evening, and hope you have a good weekend.
Always. Thanks a lot.
All right, cheers, guys.
Hey, we're gonna put you in the green room for a second. We'll come back to you, and we're gonna close out the show. We'll come back and chat with you if you got a few minutes on the back end here.
Sure.
All right. Thanks a lot, man. Thanks. Good stuff.
Yeah,
it's fascinating to dig in. What's interesting to me is that in talking to him, like the game of golf, like more people don't, more golfers out there don't, really. I mean, I think he's right. I think he's absolutely right that they're always looking at other things outside of the mental aspect, and they're looking at solutions in all the wrong places. Whether it's a tweak in equipment, and I think that's it's good for people that are marketing this gadget and that gadget out there.
Well, how us marketers, it's never your fault, right? It's not your fault.
It's not your fault.
Yeah,
exactly.
But that could also sell coaching and stuff too. But yeah, I don't think that's as popular in the amateur game as it probably is mental coaching as it is in the professional circuit. So
absolutely.
But yeah, that would put a dent in club sales for sure if that got too popular. So
that's right.
There's probably a syndicate holding that down. That's probably the real issue.
It's not your fault. It's not your mental game.
Yeah.
It's all the equipment that you're using.
Equipment.
It is the equipment. Yeah. Well, thanks to all of our listeners. You can find us as always at persuasionbythepint.com. You can find us on all of your podcast platforms, Stitcher Radio, iHeart, Spotify, you name it. And Sean, we look forward to the next episode. We're going to be talking. We have a random flight on our upcoming second episode today that we're going to be publishing. So looking forward to that. We're going to get into all kinds of cool stuff.
Yep.
But we'll see you guys next time. Sean, we'll see you on the flip side.
See ya.
All right. All right, man. Hey, thanks for coming on.
Yeah.
Oh,
you're still live too.
Yeah, we cut you back up. Oh, I'm still live. Okay. There we go.